Welcome back. Today, courtesy of T. Bing's recommendation, I'm going to be covering an article called The 6 Reasons Why We Still Need Feminism. I highly recommend you all go to T. Bing's channel now, subscribe, and then leave a lovely little comment like, I don't know, moist. Is feminism sexist? Nope. And here are 6 reasons why. With women's rights being one of the major platforms in the 2016 presidential race, the conversation surrounding feminism is currently highly visible. Despite the increasing awareness of the movement, though, one very persistent question is keeping pace. Is feminism sexist? In a word, nope. An answer which feels like it should be obvious. I can agree that if you abide the definition, the movement isn't sexist, provided there is a need for feminism in your country. If there is real gender inequality in your country towards women, then feminism has a place. It is, however, sexist if feminists are pushing for discrimination against men, or promoting laws that are very gender-specific. Still, an internet search quickly yielded many men and women who have sunken their teeth into this anti-feminist rhetoric. And when they did, a great moment occurred. People realized there was more than one person on this planet with more than 2 brain cells to rub together. And because it is a conversation that is both relevant and important, the debate over feminism being a sexist enterprise merits further discussion. But as we go further into your article, which will be one more main paragraph than your 6 original points, you're not really looking for a discussion, you're looking to use what you would call excuses as reasons to shut down any criticism. But first, we must understand that feminism in and of itself is not a perfect movement. For as many issues as feminists have succeeded in championing for or against, the movement has also frequently forgotten the issues that affect women who aren't white, cis, and hetero. The very fact that intersectional feminism exists is one of the many reasons I despise feminism. The fact you've had to separate people based on race, based on sexuality, based on culture, based on environment. I'm sure the Oppression Olympics would be very proud and happy to hand out medals for this. My main issue with this is that it creates more problems. It doesn't look for solutions, it simply lays them out and categorizes them. In my last video, a black feminist indicated that many white men approach her and ask for solutions because they want to solve the problem, which to her wasn't solving the problem and was just sexist, which tells me that many feminists aren't truly interested in solving the problem, which to me renders feminism a bit redundant. That's where intersectional feminism comes in. The way I, as a white cisgender hetero woman, experience the inequalities feminism strives to correct is different from the way a woman of color or a trans woman experiences those inequalities, which isn't entirely true. A white straight woman could be in a country that is predominantly, black. She may or may not be treated similarly or less worthy or better than someone who is a black straight woman in a country that is predominantly black. The best example I can give for this would be Zimbabwe or South Africa, where white people are a little unpopular at the moment. Something which intersectionality addresses. Feminism that will truly change the world for the better cannot separate issues of sexism from those of racism, transphobia, homophobia, and more, because the crux of the matter lies at the intersection of all these systems of oppression. Throwing out buzzwords like transphobia, homophobia, etc. is really weak, and if anything just tells me you're not actually looking at the real issues within your country where sexism exists, and are instead relying on very isolated instances to validate what you believe to be a solid point. It can easily be debunked when you look at it from a worldview, which sometimes feminism will use as an excuse, like, oh, feminism is needed in this country, around the world. That's why we have it here in our country. It doesn't hold up. It doesn't stack up. Because if feminism is needed there, then maybe instead of promoting it in your country, because it won't solve the problem in the other country, why don't you take it to that country? Do more than just the small charity crap that barely anyone hears about. If anything, promote it instead of making videos on Sargon and Bering all the time. 1. When you focus equality on a specific group of people, that's not focusing on equality. This point has validity when equality has been attained for the gender that didn't have equality to begin with. So with feminism striving for equality and having achieved it for the most part in, for example, the US and the UK, it no longer needs to be there. Now, to exist as a support mechanism, fine, but to use it to push for laws that are unfair, or to have people who are very strong feminists very assertive, laugh in the face of men's issues is very dangerous and harmful to what the feminism movement claims to be about, even though it doesn't need to exist anymore, in the UK especially. The dictionary definition of feminism, that which the movement is trying to achieve, is the theory of the political, economic and social equality of the sexes. The reason the movement focuses on women's rights is because that's the side on which the inequality currently exists. White women still only make 78% of that which is earned by a white man, with that figure dropping to 64 and 53% respectively for black women and Latinas. By the same account, 75% of elderly people living in poverty in America are women, highlighting the sizable gap in poverty rates between the sexes, but these are a few of the ways that women lack equal rights in our society. Rather than sit here for the next 2 to 3 minutes debunking thoroughly the wage gap, I'm simply going to say it's personal choice. You live with your choices in life. The choices you make define you. That felt so much easier. As far as the poverty rates go for the United States, I would also like to point out to you the homeless rates, and the suicide rates, and the crime rates, and move on to your second point because I don't believe I need to say any more on the subject. 2. There are many downsides to being a man, which feminism ignores. This is very true, so I'm now going to mention them. Firstly, there are no domestic violence shelters supported by the government. There is no law that exists that protects men when they are raped. Men are considered low priority for housing even if they are homeless. Men make up the largest portion of suicide victims. Men can have their genitals mutilated legally. Men are not a protected class and the patriarchy does not exist. These downsides, alleges one critic, include longer jail sentences than women and paying more child support. As you mentioned a little further down this paragraph, the reason women are given lesser jail sentences sometimes comes down to the caregiver status, which brings up a very interesting discussion on custody battles, where in the UK there are 2 million single-parent households, 1.8 million are single mothers, and that leaves 200,000 being single fathers. I was recently doing some research into a domestic violence study because I couldn't find the information that would indicate to me how many of the single mothers got the children even though they were the abuser in the relationship, but the father couldn't support having the children, and how many of those single mothers that did not get custody of the children actually paid child support. And I love the way you try and, in the remainder of this paragraph, make excuses for why women serve lesser jail sentences to men. It is embarrassing. As far as I'm concerned, and I maintain this stance, if the law says you serve X amount of years, you serve X amount of years. You don't get X minus 1 because you're female. Quite frankly, that is a female privilege. 3. The family unit has been destroyed because of feminist distorted views on humanity. Now, this is a term I'm not too familiar with. I have heard something similar with regards to gender roles or the family dynamics, but this particular quote means very little to me. This claimant who declares feminism is the new Nazism purports that divorce rates are so high because 9 times out of 10 men are completely screwed over with courts blatantly taking one side over the other with no ramifications. I would really like to know who the claimant is because I'd like to know whether or not they are somebody that has been through something and has a lot of hatred and anger towards women, or whether they are somebody that has seen and perceived it based on courts and statistics and facts. Believe it or not, context is somewhat important. That said, this does come across as portraying women as gold diggers because they know they will always, or for the most part, nearly always win everything. 2 things. First, I couldn't find evidence of the statistic anywhere. Second, if you are in court, divorce proceedings have already begun. Thus, this can't actually be part of the argument for what causes divorces. It's circular logic. I think it would be very hard to prove whether or not, or find statistics of courts that are blatantly favouring a gender. Each case is individual, but when they stack up, you do see a trend. If there are children involved especially, you know the children are going to, for the most part, going to go to the mother, and you know that it is more than likely the father is going to be paying a significant amount of child support, because he is the breadwinner. The mother is the caregiver. Or so we are repeatedly told. If feminists are so interested in destroying gender roles, then of course this could be flipped eventually, successfully. Who doesn't want to be a house husband after all? As for feminists' distorted views of humanity, destroying the family unit, well, this is just crazy talk. No, The thing that feminists work toward, like striving to be better educated, enjoy more gainful employment, and have the right to choose if and when they use their body to procreate, contribute to society's prosperity. We're part of the evolution, not the devolution. If feminists are indeed to blame for destroying the family unit, it would then have a lot to do, and not so much to do with marriage, but more to do with how the family operates, maintaining a certain sense of normal. Of course, we as a society want to progress and evolve and improve, if we can be bothered. It does require effort, after all. So naturally, people who are more traditional, or what we deem to be traditional, are going to be very opposed to the idea of changing what works for them, and for the majority of people within certain cultures. Introducing something that has a shake-up mentality to it has, or can have, a negative effect. And that's fine, that's absolutely fine, because eventually a normal will be established, and then of course the cycle will repeat, because we just love to destroy our societies. Now, as far as better educated, gainful employment, and procreating when one chooses to goes, in the West especially, you have all three of those. You are now welcome to strawman me and say, but what about abortion and Planned Parenthood and the government being up all in our business about if we can in fact have an abortion? That's not the argument I'm making. I am simply stating you can choose when to procreate, which is what it says in this article, not when you abort, because that's a different argument entirely. 4. Feminists need to get a life and stop feeling the victim. We are all victims at some point in life. This may come as a surprise to some people, but feminists don't inherently consider themselves victims. The very idea of intersectional feminism would beg to differ. On the contrary, we're a rather empowered group, and yes, women have made progress in terms of disparity, oppression, and discrimination, but A, this is a direct reflection of the forward momentum of the feminist movement, and B, that progress is still unequivocally unbalanced. And what I'd love to know is, when are you finally going to concede that things like affirmative action should not exist for true balance to be attained? It yet again is another one of those arguments that all comes down to equal representation regardless of ability. You have equal opportunity, but you want equal outcome. And you use that, and you have laws, and you have schemes that assist with this, because you can't do it the right way, which is the way everyone else does it, with hard work. Women of colour, women of different religions, and women of the LGBTQ community do not enjoy the same threshold of progress as cisgender hetero white women. Well, the only option available to you is to virtue signal the living fuck out of any ad campaign you can do and any governmental scheme you can come up with to elevate those poor defenceless women of colour, those poor defenceless LGBTQ folk. Really give them what they need, and that's a leg up to make them feel like they're tokens. I wonder, in other countries where white people aren't the more dominant race, do schemes like this exist to elevate the poor defenseless white people who are victims of racism in those countries where white people aren't the dominant race? And it's unfair to compare the trials men experience with the way women are being denied fundamental rights that should be inherent. Just doesn't work like that. I love that in this article you, a female writer, have weighed up the rights a man has and the rights a woman has, and decided that a woman is still more oppressed even though they have equal rights and laws that protect them over men. Laws that exist solely for them, the benefit of them, that actually, if anything, mean that women are not just equal, but they're, quotes, more equal, which would make them better, a protected class perhaps. 5. Feminism was needed in the early 20th century. It got women the vote and other important rights, but now it's just an entitlement for affirmative sexism. Up until the moment, every right that ever existed that women didn't have was finally given to women because they deserved it. Feminism was needed. Whether or not feminism needs to exist now, in my country certainly, is a discussion for another day. I'm not going to tell people whether they believe something or whether what they believe should or should not exist. Going down that path leads down the same path of all cults and religions. And as far as feminism goes, it always looks to find a way to maintain relevance, hence intersectional feminism. Certainly in my country, where you've got, for example, London, a very multicultural city that is so well not integrated, where you have perpetual victims constantly saying it is the fault of these people for not helping us integrate better, or for gentrifying when we don't want it to be gentrified because it then takes away our neighbourhoods, our black neighbourhoods, or our so-and-so neighbourhoods. I'm rambling a little. My apologies for that. Curious. I don't remember getting the memo that women have total autonomy over their bodies like men. Do you remember that comment I made earlier about abortion? How in America, certainly with states, some of which dictate when you can or cannot have an abortion? Yeah, there are some things guys can't do. For example, if they get a girl pregnant, they have literally zero choice as to whether or not they get to be a parent or not. In the end, it comes down to the woman. So whether or not they have total right over their body, does that include fluids once they leave the body? I must have also missed the memo where we all got raises and promotions to bring us parallel with our working male counterparts. Choose higher paying jobs that are harder and more competitive, and work longer hours. That way you'll be easily in parallel with men while doing all the hard work that men do. Unless of course you want the easy option, which is unsurprising for a lot of dickheads. Ladies, we should be celebrating. Break out the bubbly. Only I was going to say citation needs to be true. It's instead because I see a little hyperlink, and I have of course read the article. I'm simply going to say what you wrote that is connected to that hyperlink is an absolute load of bollocks. 6. Feminism is wrong, as is masculinism. But masculinism has, for the most part, died down. Was that meant to say meninism? I can't tell if they actually think masculinism is a thing, which it isn't, or whether they were meant to put meninism, which is a hilarious and totally factual movement. To label all feminists as man-haters is to group an entire movement according to its fringe fundamentalists, which is one of the many reasons when I make a feminist response video, I do it to the individual and what the individual is saying. Also, we are very much familiar with the no one feminist represents all of feminism, which makes it very hard to pin feminism down and hold someone or a group of someone's accountable without simply being told, oh, well, they are a particular type of feminist, so they don't represent all of feminism. How very Islamic. Despite the assertion that feminism states men are pigs and deserve worse rights than women, feminists in fact truly do want equality among the sexes. No more, no less, equal. Unfortunately, what you've just said there doesn't represent all of feminism. Remember earlier, no one feminist represents all of feminism? Yeah, that applies here too. The words we're looking for in relation to the mentality referenced here are misogyny, or the belief that men are better, and misandry, or the belief women are better, neither of which are tenets of the feminist ideology. In this instance, citation needed. Because while you can hide behind the dictionary definition for so long, actions do completely trump the supposed good intentions of a movement, even one that is no longer so relevant, or one that is trying to retain relevance by creating its own little bingo board of colours and genders and spectrums. And, well, masculinism or misogyny is unfortunately alive and thriving. Need proof? Simply try to recall the last time men had to have their rights voted on. Don't spin your wheels too hard, though. The answer is never. You really need to do some good old-fashioned research into suffrage. Oh, and repeatedly we have tried in the UK to get a debate going in Parliament through petitions that should eventually, if they got enough votes, get to Parliament to create a debate or a discussion on legally changing the definition of rape to include males as victims of rape with forcible envelopment and made to penetrate being added to the definition and the criteria for what constitutes as rape. Unfortunately, we have yet to, or certainly a lot of us online that are trying to get this going and have tried for 2 years now, have been unsuccessful. We will of course keep trying, because that should definitely be made illegal. Thank you all for listening.